So the Bulgarian was productive. Looks like he was a little bit distracted by an amusement park in some of his current work.
No, Vislav, he came through with the translation. I received it this week. I've been giving it a good read. I sent it to you. I sent the PDF to you, and apparently he didn't really like the original Russian. He was very down on the original Russian and critical of it, and he doesn't want this translation of the biography of Shalamov by some Russian named Episov or Espesov or something. I don't know exactly. But he doesn't want it to be published by the Human Side Press. He wants it to be given away to people who purchase his translation of Shalamov's poetry. So it's going to be like a freebie offered to the true believers in Shalamov. So
he's doing the Jordan.
Nice,
he's doing the Jordan
nice
Peterson. He's got all of his free lectures online, and then he gets you. He gets you in the end. You got to.
Well, you got to give stuff away, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the whole thing. It's the internet is all about the giving and sharing economy. It's the economy of the likes, and the likes can be given freely. Sometimes they're given by bots and fake accounts. But anyway, Vislav. As Vislav said, and I mean, you read the translator's introduction. It's pretty short, but Vislav was very critical of the Russian writer of that biography.
What do these guys do after they get out of the gulag? I'm this Western guy, and I'm torn because I'm always wanting to leave. I mean, the only way that I feel good about my current situation is I know I'm going to leave again someday. I can't wait to leave this mother tongue behind and leave my familiarity behind and just go someplace where the same scenario doesn't confront me, because I'm traumatized. I'm bored to the point of being traumatized by this familiarity, and it's a sickness, and I think Peterson would probably say that I'm a degenerate, because even after having read his book and followed all of his 12 steps, I can't have a positive attitude. I have a really, really hard time maintaining a positive attitude.
Don't want to interrupt, but isn't what an earlier podcast we were kind of talking about it, which is like Peterson wants to help people to feel better in this current society, in this current way of life, when in fact, as you and I have both demonstrated with our own lives, we've found better places by leaving. And I'm not sure that Peterson talks about telling people to leave, but you and I have always left. We've always left places, and I think it is a kind of sickness. I would agree with you, and I'm not sure you ever can resolve anything by leaving. And perhaps it's a case of the grass is always greener somewhere else, and you have on top of that the courage to leave, because a lot of people don't have the courage to leave. They just think there's a better place, but they just can't muster the strength to do it. I don't know.
I'd go further. I'd go further. I don't know if you feel the same way. I think you might, but I feel normal when I'm on the move. Now, I think that after having traveled a lot, I wanted to get to a place where I could stop moving, but I keep forgetting that it certainly is not the West. The West is a place where you try to settle here, first of all, either through taxation or inflation or through just a dangerously socially coercive environment, you can't ever settle and be left alone. I mean, it's moving to a rural area and expecting to be left alone is a hilarious dream. You're going to turn in somebody's going to turn into a Kaczynski. They're going to see the encroachment of the development. Someone's going to reach out to them and fuck with them about their zoning or their property taxes, and they're just going to flip shit, and they're just not going to be able to to deal with the fact that people want to just harvest solitude. Solitude is like honey, and the state is like a bear just hunting solitude and freedom. It wants to go after the last pocket of freedom. So,
well, I agree that it's solitude, but I also it's the idea that you could be left alone, which is perhaps even a bigger idea than solitude.
In the West,
not be interfered with.
Yeah, I think though that even when you're living in a very social environment in another country, I think you are left alone, because the core thing that, I don't know, the state wants to combat, that is going to be the main stressor, I think, in a Western individual's life, really can't be touched by the foreign culture. Just because the foreign culture doesn't really have an opinion, maybe never will have an opinion. And if the foreign culture ever does have an opinion about you, it's going to be new problems and new scenarios that actually might reinvigorate a person's interest in everyday existence. But
well, there's a lot to be said about the everyday problems of another culture. They're very exciting for you if that's not your culture. You say, wow, I got to deal with this issue. This is exciting. I got to learn these new words, and I'm going to go do it. It becomes a project, and it's not an everyday event. You know, it's very interesting we're talking about this, because my nephew, Jean-Paul, the oldest son of my brother, who is a bass player in France, professional bass player in a symphony in Nantes. His son is going to be coming to San Antonio, Texas in August to study at a university and to be a part of the fencing team. And this young man, he put this whole thing together. He decided he wanted to return to America. He hasn't lived in America since he was, I guess, about probably 8 years old, when he was living in Arkansas. And I think, you know, France is a very difficult country. It's a very insular country. And I think he grew up being made to feel that he was not French enough, because his father was an American and he held an American passport, despite having a French passport. But he had these American experiences, and he understood the game of baseball, and he liked Sammy Sosa. And but anyway, so I think you know, it's one of these cases where he's a young man and he wants to get away from his family and his brothers, living in a small house and living in France, and he remembers, of course, fondly all of the great things about America, and so he wants to return there. That had been his goal, and he applied to all these colleges and he got into all of them, and he chose finally the one in San Antonio because he'll be 4 hours south of where I am in Dallas, as well as he has an aunt a great aunt and a great uncle here in Dallas, as well as myself, who's his uncle, and Inés, who is his Colombian aunt. So I'm very excited that he's going to come, but you know, he had to go through all this process of taking the SATs. She studied for the SATs. He had to take them in France at this special place. He had to go through a lot to do this. So I'm really proud of him that he's done this. And I hope that this return to America after all these years abroad, I guess now about 10 years, is going to be satisfying to him. And, you know, I understand it, as you probably did as a young man, about 18, 17, when you were going to go to college for the first time. You wanted to get out of your home life. You wanted to get far away. I mean, you were kind of limited because you barely graduated high school. Your selection was a little more limited, but certainly you got away. It was such a great moment in a young man's life when you first begin this process of breaking away. And
well, there's no such thing as barely graduating high school. I mean, you either graduate or you don't. The people that
well, you were under pressure.
You were under quite a bit of pressure. People that really graduate high school, I mean, extra graduate. I mean, what's the point? I mean, you graduate or you don't, right? I mean, what?
No, I'm actually complimenting you about how well you've done in your whole life with barely squeaking by. It's a testament to your abilities. that you could just have barely gotten there, and have been told repeatedly in your life that you were going to be some sort of failure. Didn't some teacher sometime tell you you're going to be a loser and wrote terrible things about you? And this was maybe your combat Doc Marten boot and wearing period where you had that long blonde hair in the front. You were punk and Dead Kennedys.
Yeah, there was resistance. I think I recall periods of administrative conflict where the administrative arm of the educational facilities felt that there were wrinkles or roadblocks or points of friction between my self-expression and their social mores. But it all worked out. It all worked out. They let me graduate, but Lord, that's not.
Well, they did. That was an exciting time for both of us because we were both under a bit of pressure because of that underground newspaper we had at the last year in high school. That also presented its own challenges when you were trying to graduate. That we could have been suspended for that. They were going to come after us. But
there was a lot of pressure against us that I felt was unethical and maybe illegal. The blackballing, basically, where they say, if you do this, if you say this, if you write this, which is, this is educational environment, so they should be encouraging people writing about their views, not feeling nervous about what would happen if they express their views, right? But these guys were saying, if you do this, then there will be consequences, and so they were, and we called their bluff, and nothing happened to us. But I think, and right now at colleges, this is happening, and it never used to happen. College was the one place, at least I remember it, where you could say any damn thing you wanted to say, any view, and the more radical, the more engaging, and the more people applauded the originality of the idea. I get the sense now that there's a lot you can't say. I've heard that comedians don't even go to college campuses anymore because everyone has lost their sense of humor and might physically try to hurt you or throw a chair at you or something if you touch on a certain topic, if you discuss certain topics.
Everyone has become very sensitive about identity and their group that they fit into, and the bar has been set very low for racism and sexism and homophobia, and who knows what other kind of isms and phobias they're gonna create, white privilege or all this stuff. It's people who are very sensitive that can't take a joke very well, and they're very brittle. They're tender people who this identity that they seem to be so protective of, and so they put this identity forward on their social media. But this identity, they have this feeling that it's always constantly under attack and being and potentially going to be destroyed, and so they need the state's protection to safeguard it.
Now, what happens when something is under attack? What happens? They're guarding something, but let's say they did a bad job of guarding it. Let's say the safe place got violated. What happens?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I really haven't talked to these people. I know that I've seen the YouTube videos that the attackers of Jordan Peterson or whoever it is that these whenever they have someone who's so-called from the right who's shouted down, it's all quite interesting. I think it's going to be very interesting to see what Jean Paul's feeling is. I don't know about this university that he's going to. I guess it's a Catholic university. He's going to be there, and he's going to be on the fencing team. And to get a scholarship, he's got to maintain a 3.0 grade point average. So I think the university system, I don't know how much of it at this place is going to reflect a lot of these general ideas we're talking about now with the identity politics and left and right and social justice and all of that. I assume that it's probably present there as well, but it's going to be very interesting as a French American, more French than American, what his take on this is going to be, because he's been in a system, the French educational system, with the baccalaureate, which is essentially like he's got like a first year of college already finished. The system is that intense in France. And it's a system that really, really has a strong French identity that it promotes from literature. And there's no social justice or like representation of the colonies of France, Algerian writers. It's all Sartre and Baudelaire and Rimbaud. And I mean, heavy literature is what you're, and philosophy is what you're doing. Descartes, they do all that as part of high school. And that program is
and
not
they learn
even
math.
open
They learn
to
math and
debate.
science too. I mean, they're pretty good at that stuff.
Heavy math and science. That's part of the baccalaureate. You have a language section, which is foreign languages. So Jean-Paul, he's fluent in English. He had to take English in high school, even though it was just a total waste of his time. He's fluent in German. He learned German. He's very good in Latin, and he has Spanish, and he's got a little Chinese. I mean, the kid has got, he's got a lot going for him. But the most important thing I think that he has going for him is that
he's a fencer too.
Yeah, and he's number 50 in the entirety of France at all age levels. It's like the pound for pound national ranking. Like he's really, really good. I mean, France is a big fencing country, so if he's 50th in the entire country of France nationally, he probably could be pretty dominant over here. But anyway, it's going to be I'm just so excited for this young guy, that he wanted to do this. He wanted to come over here. I think it's going to take some adjustment, and I think he might be a little disappointed because the America he remembers from 8 years old is not going to be the same America that there is today a decade later. And there's going to be some adjustment that he's going to have to do.
There's going to be a lot of great baseball though in Texas.
Yeah, well, there'll be that, but I think he's so serious about the fencing. There's something about athletic activity that's really, really good for a young man. You and I were both athletes. We're still athletes, but all of that athletic and that sport growing up, that teaches you more than you'll ever learn in the classroom. In my opinion, I mean, the discipline you get from that. I mean, general the suffering of running. I mean, guys who suffered running, those are guys that could do great things in anything they want to do because they've broken through that suffering barrier. And but it's only at the high levels of athleticism that you get that, where you get that knowledge that you can go to this extra place, this dangerous place where things hurt, but there's euphoria and there's achievement. And it sounds like this youth is doing that with the fencing. I mean, he trains all the time, so he's pretty serious.
Yeah, but what is it about? I've been thinking this whole weekend how I made a mistake by I went out to South America and I felt this great liberation and this happiness. Then I got back here, and I can't even figure how I got back here. That was a disastrous mistake. But I'm trying to figure out how I got to South America, and how I felt about it. I think the only way a person could want to do that is if they're so miserable that even continuing with living isn't question. So their soul is so squeezed in whatever culture they're currently in that they're pushed into another culture. Now, the Russian guys didn't have that opportunity. Not only could they not leave their own country, but the minute that they showed any individualism, they were sent to the prison camps. That sounds like fucking hell, man. That I don't know how and then these guys write all these fucking books about their prison experience.
Well, I mean, we have a similar thing going on right now. If you show the idea of individualism, and by individualism I don't mean identity politics. I mean having ideas which are your own, which come from your own experiences and whatever they come from, and they probably are against prevailing opinion. These opinions will get you, you're going to lose your job, you're going to be ostracized. Now there's an internet trail which will follow you forever. I mean, didn't something just happen with this Roseanne Barr? She said something, and now she lost her show.
So
I mean,
she
not only
had
that she lost her show, but I mean, all these people that worked on the show just lost a job. Just, I mean,
yeah,
it's very far
she had
reaching.
a really big show though. I think it had a very big following, and I think it was worth like tens and tens and tens and millions of dollars of ad revenue. And so she was going to get,
but it was all set to go. It was all set to go,
right?
And they felt that it was. These are businessmen who are making this decision. They felt that it was better to pull the plug on the whole thing and eat the loss than to go forward with the show.
I don't think the threat is
get
real.
An apology out of her.
I think that the minority of people that run this cult of personality, this whole thing where you have to do it or the world's going to cave in. I really think that they should call the bluff. Somebody's going to call the bluff eventually. Like a big company, they're going to say, you've got to do this, and the big company's going to just say, no, fuck no, I'm not going to do it. And I don't think anybody's going to give a shit.
I'm just shocked though that you think like Roseanne, her following is probably open to accepting an apology if she apologized, and the show could have gone forward. But
she's a fucking comedian, man. She's a comedian. I mean,
well, right. She's a comedian, but who is the group that really watches her show? It's probably like Middle America. They could take a joke better about some racist kind of joke, potentially racist kind of joke, than and accept an apology a lot easier than someone in Hollywood or in the West Village. And so, but that was her sweet spot. But the executives pull the plug on the whole thing anyway, and are going to eat the loss. Perhaps the executives look at it like they get social brownie points. They're going to get so many social brownie points from eating this loss that it's going to help them, in the future or something. I don't know. Or maybe there was an ulterior motive. Maybe the focus groups weren't really giving like great, reviews of the show, and they wanted to pull it. I don't know.
Well, that's the thing. It's my disgust with that kind of closed-mindedness. Man, I was at this Brazilian restaurant today, 4 times the size it was last time I went there, and it was packed with about 50 or 60 Brazilians. There no foreigners, just or that's to say no gringos, no Americans, just all Brazilians. And totally different viewpoint, totally different culture. Happy, knowing exactly how to do things. They're all in there with their families and their Sunday best. It obviously all the happy cultures that I think that you and I have identified as happy. Life comes first, family comes first. That's the main thing, and they would never be stressed out about work, and maybe that's due to the fact that there's more of a socialism in their country too, so it's less competitive, and so they don't really ever get fired very often, and that makes it so they really can't quote unquote shoot to the top, make a lot of money, or form a business very quickly. So there's balls and strikes you can call there, but one thing is that here I am. Just thinking about, well, I don't know if I like this job I have, right? Maybe I need to leave. Maybe I need to negotiate, or maybe I need to interview outside. I don't know how often Brazilians would even think about that. I think that they're more they're more like the Italians. They're thinking of their next meal. I mean, Sunday, it's obvious what you do on a Sunday. You have this big stew and grilled meat, right? And that's every Sunday, and you would never violate that. It's like a religious law. The West, the faster and more competitive and complicated these corporations get, the more chaos I think it's creating, because it will gnaw at the very last thing that is standing in the way of happiness, namely the family. And they've almost removed the parents from having any involvement with their children. Now I'm generalizing. There's all kinds of great families. They homeschool, or they send their kids to private school, and they're very involved. But there are a lot of families where they don't ever see their children. I mean, from the moment they're born, they send the fucking infants into goddamn daycare, and then they send their kids to the public schools where they're fed God knows what, and then they're sent to the gulags of the post-secondary education, where they're finished off, and then they're sent into the matrix, where they either have just blindly learned some trade or something, or.
But if you look at if you look at our lives, though, we both of us are ramblers. We've gone a lot of places, but yet are disgust with this way of life. We've still returned here, and I think the reason we both returned here is not for this place, really. It's because we have families here. We have our parents here. It's a very powerful reason to be drawn back to a place. Now, you don't have as much a territory as perhaps I do with Wisconsin and that lake and fishing. My grandparents being there, my great-grandfather being there from Sweden. I mean, there's a real strong connection that I have to that particular land, and my family is a part of that land. And
there's a lot to be said about
I'll always
land,
be drawn back there.
That land that you're thinking,
absolutely.
Because you don't get that with a childhood home in a suburb. You don't get that with a condo, but you always remember that fucking land. It's something very peaceful.
But the natural world. Yeah. But we're talking about the natural wild world. Fishing on the lake, ice fishing in the winter. The way the wind comes across the ice, the temperature of that wind, the way the trees move, looking at the way the shores change from the fall storms. The trees uprooted, being able to see the cabin through the leafless trees. It's very, very exciting. It's wonderful. I mean, all these people that have never hunted or fished and been drawn to like a place and gone there repeatedly, they won't really understand what I'm talking about. But I can't get away from that land, and I can also get away from walking with my grandmother in the spring, and she's pointing out the different flowers that are coming up, the buds, and she would say, the spring comes at the ground. You have to look at the ground. Don't look up at the trees. The trees tell you nothing. The lake tells you nothing. But the ground is where the spring first appears. And she could just tell me all the things that were growing.
Jesus Christ, man! That's like a fucking poetic observation there. The ground. Gee, I mean, you could argue with her observation, but I wouldn't want to. It's just very
Look,
poignant.
I was very fortunate. I think in this way I was very fortunate that I was able to grow up with an experience of the natural world, and with older people that came out of the Great Depression that had to live off the land to some degree or another, and land that had been in your family for multiple generations, even a great-grandfather that I never met. So this is a very serious connection. I can't ever get away from that. And I wouldn't want to get away from that. I can't travel to Colombia and get that, because this is something that's born out of the blood. This is born out of the terroir. Comes out of the soil, and I can't adopt a new soil, halfway through my life. It just can't happen. And I think this is a real trouble with young men or young people.
But your ancestors did that.
They don't have this connection.
Your ancestors did that.
Well, I'm hopeful. Look, and that's why I come back to Jean-Paul. I'm really hopeful that he perhaps has enough of a connection to America that this is going to be a great experience for him. But at the same time, I wonder what connection to America he really has. If it's just some sort of quasi-cultural connection, it may not be enough to sustain him. It may not be enough to make him think, well, I want to stay here. I think he's someone who's kind of between two cultures, and I understand that to a degree because, and I think you do too. When you learn other languages and you live in other countries, you become between two cultures, and it's an awkward place to be all the time. You're never comfortable, and you're always thinking you've made some mistake because you're where you're at, and it would be better if you would go back to what you were at before. You know too much about the world to ever be comfortable in the world. That's the reality of it.
Yeah, my advice to a young person is if they've actually had the capacity and wherewithal to take off to a country, is to not give up, to not go back, because it's the longer you do it, the more you get your roots, and the more comfortable it gets. And emigration for the strong is a good thing. It regenerates a spirit, and I think it's a spirit of exploration and conquest. I know that we were talking about how the Westerners, it's absurd to think that they should be traveling or they should be conquesting, but isn't there something about and I'm reading into the hunter-gatherer by my running trails. That's my idea of the hunter-gatherer comes from reading books about the hunter-gatherers and running trails. So that's my.
Well, it shouldn't completely. I mean, you've been a hunter in a way. I mean, you've gone. We went fishing together. You've caught fish on a lake.
No, I actually
you killed animals.
What I'm thinking of is the trail running. When you go out and you run, so you can go to the wilderness here in North Georgia, and you can run.
Well, I know, but I'm talking. I mean, when we speak about hunter gatherers, we're talking about actually being able to get food from the natural world. You don't have to pay for this food. You go out, and through guile and cunning, you are able to get it yourself. To have that experience is a very rare experience. You're not going to a supermarket to get your meal.
Are you talking about commercial fishing, or are you talking about going and doing it on a lake?
No, I'm talking about in Wisconsin.
Oh.
Like you and I went out onto the lake, and you fished tip-ups, and you caught fish, and I think you probably killed the fish and cleaned the fish. Didn't you do that?
Yeah, well, I also did it to completely deserving halibut that were.
Yeah, but I mean that was a commercial situation. That's different. We're talking about like when you caught the fish yourself, you hooked a minnow and you put it in the tip. You set the tip up and you waited on the ice, and then you caught the northern or the largemouth bass, and you threw them on the snowbank in the snow and let them die, freeze. And then later on, you thawed them out, and then you opened them up, and you filleted them.
Northerns are bony.
Nice
they're bony fucking fish, aren't they?
A lot of bones in the northern. That's why my grandmother always said, Peter, go out and catch a largemouth bass for me. It's always very hard to catch largemouth bass because
you've got to jig. You got to jig the largemouth bass, right?
No. That you catch them on a tip up. You can catch them on a jig too, but the lakes that have northern pike in them, usually the other species get eaten by the pike. The pike are very predatory. They just eat everything. They'll eat the little pikes. They'll eat everything. So the largemouth bass population usually is suppressed, or any other species, because the pikes they're just voracious.
Now Scott would probably
Elmar
would interject and say that it had to do with the scientific management of the lake. That quote unquote scientific management just results in the thinning of the natural diversity.
Well, there is something to be said about the. Look, scientific management. There's a lakes district on that lake that was started by my grandfather to protect the aquatic environment, to stop boats that we've brought down to the boat landing that might have invasive species that would be introduced to the lake from some other lake.
Right. Yeah. That mussel, the zebra mussel.
Yeah. Yep. That's a big one. But there's all kinds of other stuff. Like even my grandfather would say, those minnows that we would fish with, those cannot be released into the lake. Like sometimes you think the minnow, no fish ate the minnow. I'm just going to take it off the hook and throw it in the lake, give it its freedom or something. You can't do that because you're introducing a foreign species. So it's very, very strict, the idea of this stopping any foreign intrusion. But that in itself is a very interesting idea. What is the idea there? Do you want to maintain the lake as though what? As though fishermen would come and fish with the foreign species of minnow, and they would catch things with it, and then they would leave, but never introduce those minnows. There's all this meddling that's going on with the lake and the system, but you have this sort of false idea that you would be leaving the lake pure, as if no humans had shown up with their boats and their zebra mussels and their minnows from Mr. Ed's bar that farms the minnows to sell you buckets of minnows for fishing. It's a very ridiculous idea. It's very false.
This is the thing about people with their words and their languages and their activities, is that the lake had been a lake throughout its whole life before humans had any interaction with it. But the minute that humans begin to interact with the lake, they've got to start defining it and managing it and doing something to it, to the point where it's probably going to no longer even be a remnant of its original lakeness. They
have all these rules. They have all these rules. Like there's a guy who got in trouble because he cut all the foliage near the lakeshore and he put sand down because he wanted to make a beach for his grandkids. You can't do that. That's against the rules. You can't put sand into the lake. And so they came to the guy and the Lakes District tried to stop him, but they can't stop him really. They don't have a lot of legal power. It's very, very difficult to stop anybody. So you get stuff like that, and then on top of it, you have jet skis flying around. You have levels of oil and fuel in the lake.
You've got septic tanks. You've got fertilizer on people's backyards. You've got
the biggest issue is farming. They tried to push the farmland away because farmers use fertilizers that get into the runoff and end up in the lake. So you have all this stuff that ends up into the lake, but you're still trying to claim that the lake is somehow pre-human in a way. It's natural, and natural somehow doesn't include humans and their meddling. That's what nature really is. No humans, no meddling from humans, no transformation by humans. That's natural. It gets back to this idea that humans are somehow outside nature. We're outside of the world that we live in. We're this special species.
Yeah, what I can't get is the scientific idea of forestry, where you have a 300-year-old tree or a 400-year-old tree, like a really old tree, like in California, and you cut it down, but they say, well, it'll grow back. And by the time it grows back, if it ever does, to the size that it originally was, the language that they're speaking today, 300 years from now, is probably going to be unintelligible, almost. Life is going to be so different that it's this. I know you used to write a lot about the Western idea of transcendence. That's how these people live these miserable lives, is they use the what the phenomenologists call transcendence, the future, which is It's not real. It doesn't exist. It's a form of what did the phenomenologists like Sartre and Heidegger say, that it was one of the ecstasies? It's like this Greek term for escape or something like that. And
yeah, I'll agree with that.
I mean, you can destroy nature for the transcendence of the possibility that the tree will maybe grow back. It's the same thing with human happiness. That I'll grind down. And I'll have this hellishly boring and stifling shit job where I'm doing heaven knows what with a computer or something like that, because later on I'll be able to start up the happiness or the great life all over again. I'll just it's all gonna be good. Just just in the future, it's all gonna be fine.
Yeah, there's so many people that are. And it's not just other people; it's me as well. You say, "Well, I gotta do this for a while, and then I'll be able to do the thing that I really want to do." But the question is always, are you really going to ever do the thing you really want to do? Is this really a good project? Is this your best use of your time? Is this because really the reality is, when it comes down to it, it's time. Time is the most valuable thing that you have. It's all you've got. You're just going to be here for a while. And, there's also another component to that, which is strength. It's some combination of time and strength. And strength, I mean energy, I mean physical strength. If you are actually doing a job that is using up all of your time and doesn't allow you to maintain and build your physical strength, then you're going to be so weakened when you do have the time at the end of this, whatever this project of working something you don't want to do is. You're going to not be able to pursue the thing that you were planning to pursue, and you're ground down, you're reduced, and you may never be able to come back from that. It might have just been a huge mistake from the start.
Or you then get it causes like cancer or something like that. I mean, isn't
well? There's that. Yeah, there's that too. I mean, that's one reason I had to get out of truck driving. Like I'm trying to do now. I'm going to be on a forklift more and doing a little trucking. But I gotta have. I can't drive a truck and sit in a seat for 11 hours a day, and then have a few other hours of also some on duty working. It's just killer. It's absolutely killer for the your ass. You get hemorrhoids. You get terrible things happening to you, and the bumping and the rumbling. It's just all bad. It's not made for human beings to do that kind of job. And so now it's much more athletic, the work I'm going to be doing, and then I'll be home every day, be able to pursue the boxing, and more time for writing and book publishing. It'll be hard and strenuous, but there's nothing wrong with hard and strenuous if you're building power.
No, the
worst is if
the
you're
perfect
really
job,
hard, but you're not building your strength somehow.
Yeah, the perfect job.
So this will be with forklifting and having to load stuff into trailers and lift things and move things physically. This will also be exercise. It's closer to Alaska and what we're doing up there, which is really good. Which is a really good job. If you're gonna do like manual work, or you're gonna do like this working class stuff, you gotta do stuff that actually benefits you physically. It doesn't cause you to deteriorate.
And in many ways, Alaska is the perfect combination of
General.
Yeah, can you hear me? Yeah. I'm trying to think what are you can you hear me now? Oh shit. Yeah, that was a minor technical interruption. Are we back?
Yeah. You didn't stop it. You didn't stop recording, did you?
Nope.
Good. Yeah, we're all good. I was rambling anyway, and just.
Well, I mean, I think the perfect combination of something that contributes to a real future. That is to say, like some type of capital where you know exactly where it's going is fishing. Because if you're fishing, a certain amount of money is going to go to the future purchase of fuel and bait and paying the crew and maintenance on the boat and buying the quota, and there's a purity in the transaction classes in fishing. I mean, there's only a few recurring costs. There are many surprises in terms of the things that have to be done to fix the boat and keep it afloat and keep the engine going. But in a large corporation, there's a lot going on where people can lose like a sense of exactly what it is that they're doing if something actually has value, especially if you look at something like accounting or finance. I mean, really, what at the end of the day, what a lot of people might ask themselves, what am I actually analyzing? Why am I creating this report? Why am I having this meeting? When you're fishing, it's obvious. I mean, you value your rest, you value your sleep, you value your time not fishing.
Well, there's an element I think human beings are still trying to grapple with, this second order of work in the world, the second derivative and third derivative. I think we're almost onto a third derivative of work, which is virtual, which is completely unnatural. There is no influence of the natural world in any way. There is no question of the natural world in that work. And I think a second order derivation of work is accounting and things like that. Because look, like the company you're at, which is a paper company. Paper comes from the earth. There are trees. There are things growing. There are growing seasons. There are all these influences. Like, I'm involved in trucking, so there's the weather. The earth still has an effect upon the businesses that we're involved in. But now we're at a third derivative of work, where these people who are purely working off of a virtual world, the work they do on a daily basis has nothing to do with the earth itself. The animals play no role. The weather plays no role. The time of day or night plays no role. This is just a total aberration in human history. We've never had this before. And we've gone from the second derivation of work, which had a limited role of the world, to no role in the world, the natural world at all, within the space of like 100,
yeah,
150
and
years.
I think it's very bad. I don't think that that type of lifestyle can be called progress, because it eventually eats away at the very health, the spiritual health of the people. There's a movie. It's got some famous people in it. I can't. I think Scarlett Johansson is one of them. The guy from Train Spotting. Who's that guy? He had a shaved head in Train Spotting. Ewan McGregor is in it.
The Scottish guy?
And it's not a very well-known movie, but I know that Kenneth Royce, the Boston Tea Party, the libertarian guy, the gun guy, he wrote about this movie, and it's an underground organ harvesting scientific company where they actually they grow people at a very, very, very fast rate, human beings in a test tube environment. And I don't know how they do it, but they get these people to adult shape and form fairly quickly. And they are genetic replicants of wealthy people that order their replicant made to replace one or several of their organs that need replacement. Now, I think it's actually the case that...
Oh, so they can be immortal. They can just keep
Yeah,
living.
well, if you needed a new liver or a new kidney or something like that. Now, I don't know if these people are actually aware of the operation, this underground operation, that they're actually making physical replicants of the original person. But in any case, what they found is that the initial trial didn't work, because when they kept these people or these bodies in a state of torpor, the organs failed. And so what they found is that they had to actually create a social environment and allow these people to walk around and interact, and
like a world. They needed a world for the organs actually to work.
Yeah, but then when it was time to harvest the people, they would kill the person. They would cut out their heart, cut out their eyes, and then just chuck them in the garbage. And so this movie, I guess a couple of them end up escaping, and then they.
So it was sort of like chicken farming. Like, cows.
But I think the correlate is that the same thing is happening. They're trying to they're trying to push people as much as they possibly can to have their entire life as a worker, and then the further complication is that computers are pushing people out of their jobs. I mean, maybe not in things like advertising, but definitely in management. Managing a corporation can
look, when they can when it's possible to computerize everything, the overseers will do it. So there's a conflict between the technology and the workers. The only place which there is no conflict is the owners of capital and the technology. If you have capital enough to survive your whole life, then you're fine. Then you're not necessarily have to be a worker and be threatened by technology.
Well,
but I mean, you're crazy to think that if you're like a middle management person, or you're like even an accountant, you can all be replaced. They're going to create the technology to do that. And that is the goal, because the owners of capital do not want to pay salary. That is the cost to get rid of.
Right. Now, the irony is that even if you have a capital base, and especially if you're not directly involved in an underlying entity, you have to your capital is going to have to jump around in its form. Whether you've got a perfect basket, the basket will always have to change. Let's say your basket is precious metals, Bitcoin, a selection of fiat currencies, perhaps real estate. All of that can be under attack by a system that wants to eat away at a store of value. One bit. I mean, all the.
Well, there's one other element though, and this is actually quite a curious element about capital. Is when you have a pretty good amount of capital where you can make investments, then you have the mentality that you want to grow your investments because you don't have massive amounts of capital. The problem is when you concentrate capital in massive amounts with different people, they're inherently conservative. They don't feel the need to invest in anything anymore because it wouldn't really benefit them too much. It would probably expose them more to loss, and they don't need to lose anymore. So capital in its biggest form becomes conservative. Capital at a certain size can be very aggressive. And the problem we're seeing, at least in these capitalist
once you've got a $10 million base,
is conservative. Yeah, but we're very much getting closer to being very conservative in terms of capital, in terms of having capital. Like if Jeff Bezos and Zuckerberg and the Walton family have all the capital, they're going to be interested in philanthropy and taking political power, and they're not going to be interested in like taking new ideas and growing them and investing in them because it's going to seem small time. Because every idea is a small time idea. The people that invested in Google in the beginning, Google was nothing. Like Shaquille O'Neal invested in Google like $25,000 or something, and that turned into like $120 million or something. But it was a small time investment by a very wealthy man who was being very conservative. And so I just think that eventually you get to the point where you have a bunch of Medici family people who are supporting artists and doing philanthropy for their own self-help, and you're not getting any further development. I think capitalism may reach a point where technology slows down because the wealth has all been accumulated in these few centers, that these people have everything, and they don't feel the need ever to invest in anything anymore, really.
Well, what about the creative destruction of technology, though? That one guy's platform is gonna destroy another guy's platform. Facebook might become irrelevant, or
I just think I think there's a mythology that's been started in the last 15 years of Silicon Valley that it's going to play itself out a lot faster than we think. Like, we tend to think that everything is going to be like in a straight line continuum and just keep developing at this present rate. I actually think the exponential rate of growth that we've seen over the last 150 years may taper off. Everyone else is predicting, no, it's just going to keep increasing exponentially. But what if it tapered off? That would be a shock to everybody. What if the internet actually had a very leveling force? And it may very well have a leveling force if it's going to, artificial intelligence and computing is going to put a lot of people out of work. It's going to stop the velocity of money, which is how bankers make money, which is how all these groups make money. So I don't know. I mean, I think there may be a systemic change coming, which is something that's unexpected. People keep thinking this industrial revolution pace of development is going to continue.
What is the final transformation? I wrote this very apocalyptic series of aphorisms about how we end up eating computer. Like computer turns us into this layer, this all these layers of technology, and we get to the point where, let's say we're living on a spacecraft, and then the spacecraft itself is creating food. It's just making a carbon. It's just like you can take an ethylene base and turn it into different pharmaceuticals. We would do the same with food. We wouldn't use the soil. We would bypass all of that. Now maybe that ends up being.
I just don't. You know what I think? I still think it comes back to a simple point, though, is that technologically we may be able to come up with these things, but we just don't know about the unintended consequences in terms of our own physiology, that we may provoke certain things happening. And I wouldn't be surprised if some new super virus was created because of overcrowding. We've always had new bacteria created when overcrowding reaches certain points, and with the lack of nutrition, like natural world nutrition in the food, I just don't think we're prepared to battle immunologically some sort of new bacteria that could be very, very virulent and strong with the processed foods that people seem to be eating, even the heavily farmed foods.
Right. Well, I mean, what continues to?
I don't know.
What continues to motivate people?
I'm not actually that optimistic.
Is the other question.
I think we're moving too fast.
What is going to continue to motivate people? I mean, people need to be doing things and excited about things. And what is?
Look, they got Facebook. That's all they need.
I mean, this guy Tesla. Oh no, not Tesla. Is Musk, who has he's very excited about.
Yeah, it's Tesla.
He's very excited about the space exploration and all of that, and I can get it at the individual level. I can see how I would want to create a rocket ship and get in that rocket ship, but I don't want to be kind of carried with that. I don't want this Musk guy to say, yeah, we're leaving Earth and you've got to go with us and follow all these rules. And it just seems like the more technologically progressed they get, the more technology is just going to be at everyone's throats constantly, and you're going to lose human freedom and all the impulses that keep us going, give us a reason for existence. This is apocalyptic. I'm sure maybe it could go in either way. I mean, they say Peterson talks about how there was this UN goal to have poverty, and it happened. And I guess they're defining poverty in terms of calories per day, access to electricity, clean water, and then he talks about access to unlimited computing power. So all these, like India and China, have eliminated poverty, basically, starvation. I mean, people are people have plenty of calories to the point where they're exporting things. You can buy Indian meals that are actually made in India. They're these prepackaged Indian dishes. They're good. I've had them. And so India, which like 30 years ago, you used to think about like the worst slums that you think, well, it's India, and people that are starving. And now you can buy food that's made in India. You can buy food that's made in China. But I don't know. I don't know if is it making people happier? Are these original ancient cultures that are being replaced by
Look, I think there's a pull between two things, and I think on one end, Jordan Peterson represents this very well. He's a very conservative person. He's saying this is the way things have been for a long time in terms of our the Jungian that whole myth stuff and everything. Like he's saying, look, he's saying as a person who's not religious, he's saying the book of the Bible is a very essential book to understanding who we are and being happy in your life. And I think in many ways he's a conservative person who is trying to help people feel good in an environment of heavy capitalism, competition. Can I just interject really quickly? Indebtedness and technology.
Are you capable of editing terrible music? Because there's a pool party that they've cranked up some really terrible fucking music.
Yeah, we can take it out.
Yeah, I can't seem to get away from it. I've closed all my windows.
At about
but Jesus Christ.
Yeah, at about the 1 hour mark. At about the 1 hour mark, some terrible music comes on.
Yeah.
I don't know. I can't hear it. I can't hear it really.
Yeah,
it probably is not going to be very very audible. But getting back to what I was saying though is that there's a sense of conservatism in Peterson, which this conservatism goes against Western civilization. Actually, Western civilization has all been about the furtherance of development politically, economically, capitalistically, technologically, and to say suddenly that the things that will bring the most happiness is to slow all of the development of all that down, but at the same time not to overturn it and say we should live as hunter-gatherers and we'd be happier. Jordan Peterson never says that. And I mean, I as someone who's studied these hunter-gatherers, you as well, I mean, you and I are continually asking the question, I mean, should we just chuck this entire system and go to Africa and join the what's that one tribe that's still wandering around out there? The how do they say their name? The Kalahari or the
Are you talking about
something?
these tribes that are the persistence hunters, the ones?
Well, there's one that's still there. There's one that's still there that's a hunter-gatherer, and you just show up. If you just show up, you can join the tribe and start hunting with them, and they'll share their food with you. There's some white dude that did it like a few years ago. I mean, but the thing is, though, I mean, is that what we're talking about? Is the choice between living this capitalist in this capitalist world, or a communist world, or whatever, but it's something based on current fiat currency and politics, or is it living off the land in some very primitive old way? I don't know if these are the choices. I just think that we're at a place where there's a new upheaval happening with technology, which is furthering the idea that these two choices are very, very different. You know, there's a virtual world which is out there now. We didn't have this before, and there is nothing further from the hunter-gatherer than the virtual world. Nothing further.
Yeah, I mean, the question is it good to start with the hunter-gatherer? I mean, why not before the hunter-gatherer? Why not start with maybe something that was pre-Homo sapien? Is it always the divergence from is the hunter-gatherer the ideal past, or is it like the
according to
Precambrian
Peterson,
ocean that had a very low, where the atmosphere had a very low oxygen level. I mean, where do you start?
If there is any individualism in the world, it's what is the best place for you? And I would argue that the best place for a person is not on Facebook and living in a virtual world. I don't think anyone has developed and evolved physiologically to understand how to live in this new way. What I do think is that there are people who have very strong elements of being a hunter or being a gatherer, and these are just latent instinctual things, and they have these things. And that's why some people are ramblers, as you and I have been. They've always having to leave, going off and looking for other things. These are old instincts that we're following, but at least we're following these instincts. There is no instinct to want to go on Facebook every day. That is not an ancient instinct. I mean, it has elements of an instinct of socialization and things like that it's tying into, which makes it very powerful. But the actual technological act of doing that, there is no perfect correlate that people 10,000 years ago had Facebook. Facebook's brilliance is that it's building on those ideas, but it's doing it in a way that we are completely unaccustomed to, and it can't be a healthy interaction.
What about the idea, though, that 10,000 years ago, not only did Facebook exist, but something far more advanced than Facebook exists? The idea that all these, this goes back to that there was a Joe Rogan podcast where they're talking about Göbekli Tepe or whatever the hell it's called in Turkey, and it was did some advanced civilization come down and knock hunter gatherers off their path and align them to the star.
Well, the whole argument was that there was no evidence of farming at Göbekli Tepe, or however you say it. And so the idea was that only farmers could have constructed such a beautiful and ornate, a religious, obvious structure of such size and artistic development. But there were only hunter-gatherers there. And look, we have a lot of unanswered questions that will never be answered.
So maybe it was like an advanced civilization, and it wasn't even farming, but it was like a food truck. Like they came out and they.
Well, Scott actually, I believe that Scott is onto answering these questions, and Joe Rogan really needs to put James Scott on his podcast. I mean, James Scott with his latest book has far surpassed what that English guy, Graham somebody or other, I think was his name, that has written some books about some sort of civilization of Atlantis that was moving around. I think Scott gives a very, very definitive understanding of this, Göbekli Tepe in particular, that it's not, the demarcation is not between farmers and hunter-gatherers. The line of demarcation is between sedentary people and non-sedentary people. Hunter-gatherers can be sedentary if the environment permits it. They could be as sedentary as a farmer. And that's why a lot of the marshland areas, I just don't know, is Göbekli Tepe a marshland area? If it was a marshland area, it would make sense that there were sedentary hunter-gatherers there that had surpluses, and it didn't have to work very hard at all. So had these tremendous surpluses, and they could build temples. And I'm not sure even Scott, I haven't finished Scott's book, but I'm not sure even he answers really this, because he was not really concerned with talking about this particular place in Turkey. But the real question, I think, for me, is not hunter-gatherers versus farmers, but sedentism versus ramblers.
But hang on, I haven't read his new thing. I've listened to some of his recent lectures. It's been a couple of months, but again,
it's a great book. It's a great book.
What does Against the Grain say about what does the Against the Grain say about the fact that does he touch more on the fact that well, let me back up a little bit more. Scott was he the one that wrote 1491 or
No. That was Charles somebody. But Scott, he mentions in his introduction that this book Against the Grain is modeled on 1491 in terms of bringing a lot of different scholarship together. Scott basically says that I am not responsible for the scholarship in this book, but I am responsible for making the links between the different scholarly works and putting forth my opinions, which is what that 1491 book did brilliantly. And I think Scott's book Against the Grain stands with 1491 as these great resources of scholarship where you can look and you can say, well, if you want to know more, then you can search out the original source texts and studies and articles. It's that important. It really is that important because you kind of need a guy who's a generalist to be able to go in and to look at all of these different discoveries for the different. We have such a breakdown of disciplines, and there's no discussion between the different disciplines now at these universities or between these scholars. You need the archaeologist to talk to the environmental science, to talk to the geologists, to talk to the anthropologists, to talk to the philosophers. You just don't get that sort of these discussions at all, and that's why you need a guy like Scott or that Charles guy who did the 1491. Charles, whatever the hell his name was, last name. But these are great books that combine all of this together under this great scholarship by a really talented person.
Well, the takeaway from 1491 was not that the Europeans came to the innocents in North and South America and wrecked everything, and they did to some extent with the disease, but it wasn't one technological level of sophistication versus another, because they pointed to the obvious things like the Mayan civilization. They said, okay, that was very, very complicated, and we knew about that, but then it talked about like a civilization in Iowa thousands of years ago that was built on top of a marsh. They had like a floating platform.
Well, that as we speak right now, there is Cahokia, which is in southern Illinois, which I visited. It's these massive mounds that no one even knows what's in the mounds. It was the biggest city. It was the biggest city on Earth in like 800 AD, 900 or 1000 or something like that. It was bigger than Paris. It was bigger than London. And that was right here in North America in southern Illinois. And 98% of what's in these mounds is unknown. No one knows. There are mounds everywhere. Like people are farming over the mounds that existed of this ancient city. No one knows why the people left. No one knows anything. These places exist, and what's interesting about them is, and I think what's very interesting about the 1491 book, and at least and also the work that Scott has done.
You know, my dad had about 1,000 acres in southern Illinois that he farmed not too long ago, and they dug up artifacts all the time. They were regular artifacts. They were just arrowheads, but just in a regular day, you could pick up 100 arrowheads. It was just they used to.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, the days of like being able to do that are coming to an end, though. Unfortunately, where we're gonna have no reminder of the way things were. But the interesting thing about 1491 and Scott's book is that there was a real sense of when the white people arrived, the Europeans arrived, and they didn't realize that bacteria and disease had spread ahead of them. So all these civilizations were being killed off before they got there. And when they would get to these places, they would see like an abundance of fruit and vegetables. And to them, it seemed to be really, really concentrated in certain areas. But they believed it was natural because they didn't understand that there was farming in a very different way going on by these peoples. that they put down because they didn't have religion and they didn't have all the things. And they saw them and they saw that they were dying. They looked to be sick people. So they assumed that this land of North America was just a land of great abundance everywhere in these pockets. It was just incredible.
Well,
and the people that lived there were these sickly idiots.
But what blew my mind
and it was
at the end of 1491, they said because of deforestation in Brazil and that plus the satellites, they were able to look at a peninsula and realize that it was man-made, that these canals must have been dug.
Well, they discovered also that the Amazon, in the Amazon, they believed Amazon was kind
cultivated.
of farmed. Yeah. Cultivated, exactly. So there's this, and I think this is the air of Hugh Brody, which is to put on one end hunter-gatherers and to put on the other end farmers. And I think when you make that this dialectic, which is very adversarial, you're missing the point, because there was never the idea, and this is the idea that Scott brings out in his book, which is the greatness of this book, which is that farmers and hunter-gatherers, there was never this conflict between them. And it was never like, you hunter-gatherers need to become farmers, and we're going to coerce you, and the state's going to coerce you. That's bullshit. That never happened. And what happened is that population growth and resources being limited, it transformed what people did. But farmers were just as able to become hunter-gatherers in a year where their farms didn't produce as hunter-gatherers probably were to become farmers. I mean, it was just a way to survive. And people were looking at the best ways to survive relative to their free time and their culture and their families and their religion. It's really no different than any other time.
But were these individuals just doing their own thing, or were they large scale governments and civil? I mean, was the individual? Did the individual have any meaning 1,000 years ago, or were they being directed? Were they just a unit of labor? I mean, like, what was the quality of life if these canals were being dug?
There's some. I mean, this is a central issue of Against the Grain by James Scott, which is, when did the state arise? Why did the state arise? What's interesting is that the first state didn't exist until like 3000 BC, so around 7,000 years after agriculture began, the first state didn't exist. That's you almost have to account. I mean, there's been an argument which says that states existed when agriculture existed, and there was taxation, and there was this and that. And so the question then becomes, why does the first state only arise at 3000 BC in Mesopotamia and all this? And Scott actually makes an argument that the earth itself, there was a change in the weather that resulted in the water supply for the farms in the Mesopotamian region to be changed. So you had a large population that suddenly was not able to farm with the same ability. And they realized that if they could share the water and run irrigation with the water, then this large population would all be able to survive. So it was a group decision made to share a resource in the best way that would be able to benefit all of them, that created the first state. And so taxes were applied to pay for the irrigation for everybody, and everyone agreed to it. I mean, it's actually no different than what my grandfather did on the lake in Wisconsin. He said, if we want to enjoy this resource of the lake, this wonder of the fishing, and we can go boating, we can have all this stuff, we have to take care of it. We have to protect it. Now we have so many people living on the lake that it's threatening the lake itself. It's threatening the thing that everyone wanted to purchase and be a part of. And so we could give a little bit of money every year, each of us. We can create this bureaucracy of the Lake Management District, and we can manage the weed growth. So we can let people's boats come back and dock, and their pontoon boats can get to their docks. We can cut the weeds. The fish life will be better for the fishing. We can monitor the the water quality for swimming. It's no different than any of that. It's actually a very simplistic thing. But it was the first instance where you have a state that was created. But I would bet that there have been states created in other forms for a long, long time with human beings. Whenever there was too much population and the resource was being limited or threatened, you probably had humans coming together and creating some sort of bureaucratic group to manage and protect that resource.
Yeah, I mean that's the key. That's the key, is creating a system which supplants the individual. That's the main conflict. And then once you get that system in order, that system that supplants the individual, then you're going to have a conflict forever of individual and his space against that system, or his family's space against that system. That's the new thing, is that system, it's self-perpetuating, it feeds itself. But the question is, what direction is it going?
Look at my father is now the commissioner or the president of the Lakes District. My grandfather's passed, now my father is head of it. So it's always been in the family since my grandfather created it. My father has to deal with people who live on the lake, people who have been there for a very long time, who do not want to pay. They want the lake to be of the quality they've always known, and they don't want to pay the district to bring that quality of water and everything that they enjoy. They don't want to. They don't think they should have to pay for it. But you have to pay for it when the population is putting a stress on the natural world. And I think there's that same element with what happened in Mesopotamia. If there was this environmental change that reduced the water supply for farming, which is what Scott's basically arguing.
So they ran out of water in Mesopotamia. They ran out.
Well, I think this is a very interesting idea, which is just simply that the state was not created by men. The state was created by the natural world. All things are, at least up until the time of the internet, are been created by the natural world. And perhaps now we're on, like I was saying before, this third derivation, where we can actually have things that are virtually created by other virtual things. So we've moved so far away from the natural world that we're talking about perhaps politics, which is virtual. We're talking about all these kind of stuff, which is virtual. And I think this is very confusing for people, because people still have to walk outside and they need an umbrella when it's raining. And if there's an earthquake, they could be killed. So people are still a part of a natural world, but at the same time, they're also a part of this new world, which has nothing to do with nature. And it's very confusing to a human being. We're just not prepared for this. And I think that's a real problem for people at this point, especially young people who have only grown up with virtual stuff.
Right. You know? They've only seen the reactive coercion. They didn't ever see the original form of life, and they've got no method of comparison. And that method of comparison is very important. To see where we came from and then how we arrived, but
I bet. Well, what if the point really was that the state was kind of irrelevant to the whole thing? We really were always, as human beings, more concerned with the natural world and technology, and our own technology, and the state. You know, the libertarians perhaps give too much of a focus on the state. And the state really is, it seems very powerful, but I mean, a state could be wiped out very simply by a natural event or an economic breakdown. A state maybe is not very strong at all. And the state only exists because of the agreement of the people, any state really. And the real powers are technology and the earth itself. That the earth would just decide that river will no longer flow in that path.
Do you think the state is perpetuated by a collection of individuals, or just a few who hold capital?
Well, like I said before, I think it depends upon the size of capital held, and if you have a very few people controlling all the capital, you're going to have a slowdown in all of these growth systems, capitalist growth systems, and technological growth systems. And I think this is inevitable. I really do believe that all of these things we're seeing growing very quickly right now, and people are projecting, oh, we're going to go to Mars, we're going to do all this. I would say just the opposite. I would say that within maybe another 100 years' time, things will just grind to a halt, and you're going to have a standoff between the people that hold capital and the people who have nothing, and the computers which are doing all the work. And it's going to be a very dangerous situation that's going to probably demand a new system, which is neither capitalist, nor communist, nor utopian, but it's going to necessitate a new system. We keep fighting the same old battles, totalitarianism and communism and utopianism, and identity politics is just another variant on all this stuff. But we're fighting old battles now. But they're not actually old. 150, 200 years is just not a very long time. So we'll probably fight these battles for maybe another 100 years or so. But the technology is going to transform the earth. The populations are going to continue to grow. Maybe there'll be a bacterial thing that wipes out a lot of human beings and changes stuff, a new plague or something. I don't know. But I think capital will continue to be consolidated by a small group of people. And that is conservative in the end. That is going to slow everything down. Really, really slow it down.
Yeah, and then there'll be the further jumping around. Capital will have to change its form as these fiat currencies compete with one another, and the Bitcoin competes with one another. The Bitcoin it's like somehow tied to computing power. So technological progress seems to go in line with your capital base.
That's probably true. I just don't trust any of this technology stuff. I think in some ways the technology, it seems to be an answer, but what if electricity stopped tomorrow? Where would you be?
If technology were to stop tomorrow.
Falls apart. No, what if you have no electricity? I remember being in New York City during the blackout. There was a blackout. And the blackout, it was like 2003 maybe?
There's a great void. There's a great void that I think would paralyze a lot of people spiritually.
Well, the first day of a blackout, generally, you got to live through a good blackout. There's been 2 major blackouts in New York City. To live in a big urban environment with a blackout, the first one was in like 1979, I think, or something like that. Second one was the one I lived through. And the one I lived through, the first day with blackout, everybody just had a huge party. And everyone shared their food, their refrigerators were all going to get warm. So it was just barbecues everywhere. Everyone was sharing everything. It was awesome. Everyone got wasted. This was like on a Thursday or something.
This is New York City.
Friday.
This is New York? Okay.
Yeah, New York City. The next day, people didn't have as much food, and they're wondering like what's going on. And ATM machines don't work. Cell phones don't work. The only people's phones that work are the ones that are you plug into the wall. So only a few people had some of those phones. And it was very hard to get news. And then another day went by, and suddenly you don't have any food. If you don't have any cash, you run out of cash. Can't get any money. It starts to become pretty serious pretty quickly. The system falling apart just because of electricity. Because of still to this day they don't even know why that happened or how to fix it. But it knocked out like all of the East Coast, up into Canada or something too. It's crazy. And so it went another day, And I remember being in the East Village. Some guy had a car, and he opened up his doors, and he was listening to the radio. And on the radio, AM radio, they were talking about when the power was going to come back on, and that there was parts of Manhattan that had power again. And those parts of Manhattan, the banks and the ATMs were going to be open, and so you could go there for money.
Right.
And yeah, that was the reality. And then the next day, the power came back on, and we were okay. We were saved from starvation. It was just at the very end. I mean, it was about ready to get shitty. It was about, after 4 days, it was about ready to really get bad. It was about to get bad.
Yeah, General, we're at
I don't know what happens.
We're at about
when
an
it
hour
gets
and a
bad.
half. What do you want to aim for?
Yeah. Well, let's cut it off. We got talk about New York and getting bad at another time. All right. So 5, 4, 3, 2.